on page 233.
You might have to speak up too. It's so far away. Just quick tip.
Okay, it's white knight, page 233. Okay, so I want to talk about the rhetorical questions and metaphors in the first part. So it's, why did you poison the water and mix dirt with my bread? Why did you turn my last freedom into a den of thieves? Because I didn't jeer at the bitter death of my friends, but because I remained true to my sorrowing motherland. So I think that in this quote, the author utilizes rhetorical questions and these negative metaphors to create a devastated and angry tone. When describing the actions of what I feel is like the government towards her people, she asks basically, sarcastically, for their reasoning for everybody in the homeland. And so I think this emphasizes, at least in her perspective, how there's no justification for all the suffering that they've caused. And I think by using specifically the metaphors such as poisoning the water and mixing dirt with bread, these comparisons help progress the idea that the government ultimately spoiled what was prosperous about their country.
Yeah, I definitely see that with the tone and the comparison there.
I feel like it also, the rhetorical questioning kind of helps. I'll take this down, just keep over there. But I feel like the rhetorical questioning also kind of helps develop like a stream of consciousness type narration that kind of shows us like a deeper insight into like how it impacts her personally.
Okay. Oh, what do y'all think of the part where it says, "So be it, without hangman and scaffold, the poet cannot exist in the world"? Like it's right after.
I think you gotta have like a threat, right? That to be a poet, you gotta be like rebelling to some extent, right? That without the threat of hangman or whatever, you're not gonna have that emotional reaction, perhaps, or the power with your words, right? That there's actually consequences, right, in our world, and that brings about deeper meaning to life and poetry, for that matter.
I think she's also kind of not making fun of herself, but she's kind of maybe not profited, but she's become famous because of writing about these terrible things, and so maybe she's kind of pointing to kind of the irony of her own profession in this.
Yeah, I think that's probably true too.
What is the hair shirt?
Yeah, that's what I
So again, the hair one?
Our lot is to wear the hair shirt.
maybe it's a shirt made out of hair.
Was there a translation for it?
That sounds like uncomfortable. Like a shirt made out of hair would be gross, right? So she's talking about their existence is a difficult one, something uncomfortable, is my opinion. Like it translates. Well, I think if you wore a shirt made out of hair, I'd be like, ooh. That's what it is to be a poet. It's to be uncomfortable.
It was worn by like ascetics, or is that how it's pronounced? What we learned about in Siddhartha, the people who were like meditating and stuff. Like that's the kind of people who wore it.
It's to live
the ones who like
uncomfortably.
suffered.
Yeah. I mean,
Whoa.
basically, I think what she's trying to say there is that because she said the poet cannot exist in this world, their lot is to wear the hair shirt and walk with a candle in its whale. So basically, like how I imagine that is like the candle is like they're looking for something. So basically, they're the ones that can they see the faults in the world, and their job is kind of like to point it out. So that's like their burden is basically that they know like the limitations of this world, and they try to show that to others.
I like that. I like that. Yeah, what else do we think about that quote there? Yeah. We gotta fill 10 minutes.
So I had a question for y'all. Just the one question. Why did you turn the last freedom into a den of thieves? What context do you think that was in? Was it with communism? Or?
I think it's a commentary, social commentary, political commentary potentially, on the communist revolution, right? How it's just the shift of government essentially, and maybe the struggle, the class struggle that it created. You know?
Well,
Yeah, what do you think? The den of thieves, corruption potentially.
sorry.
So the part of this is White Knight, right?
White Knight, the savior,
I'm trying to remember.
a Christ figure.
Wait.
Well, yeah, when you talk about Christ figure, that's kind of how I like talking about our lot is to wear the hair shirt. I kind of the parallel. I see
Den of
that
thieves.
as having to like bear the cross, like how that's a thing. That's a thing.
No, I don't know.
Yeah, I think you got it.
No, I really
All
don't.
right, so what about guys? This could be a biblical allusion.
Saying.
And we know about this author's or poet's religious persuasion, so therefore we can connect Jesus saying, "You turned my temple into a den of thieves."
Wait, isn't she?
Oh yeah, he does say that.
Yeah. Isn't
That's
she
good.
Jewish? Well,
I thought she was a Christian.
I thought she was Orthodox.
She's Catholic.
Yeah.
She's Orthodox,
Yeah.
no, not Catholic,
I thought she was
Orthodox.
Catholic.
Eastern Orthodox.
Yeah.
Therefore, she's making a biblical allusion here to demonstrate the political occurrences of Russia. That's a pretty interesting connection there, right, guys?
That's true.
Yeah, pretty crazy.
And it probably also just adds a layer of her resentment towards the government
Yes.
because they tried to erase religion. That's
Yes,
an
yes.
integral part of her.
What do you think, Quentin?
I think that's awesome.
He thinks it's awesome.
Yeah,
That was what we were-
I agree.
And what did we talk about? Like we talked about Miss Woodward like one day, and we were talking about white and the purpose of using.
Light, purity,
Yeah,
innocence.
But it's
like-
not purity. What did she say it was?
She said there was
It was death. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, so the white knight,
Yeah, the white
dead
knight
knight.
is dead.
Jesus.
Jesus died.
He rose again.
Oh my
Well,
god.
grab the judge not even
Well,
died.
you know, I think you're taking this a little far.
The poetry.
I think you really got it.
Dude, we broke the code. It's like the Da Vinci Code, but it's the Akhmatova code.
Within the poetry, it appears that white can also signify not just death, but more of like an eternity.
Yeah, like the white light, or an absence of emotion and thought and ideas, right?
Oh, white. Yeah.
It's
absence
blank.
of color.
Correct. Well, I just
No,
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 anything.
yeah, white has no color.
Actually, all the colors, but
Wait, I thought black. was-
white is all the colors. and black
Oh,
is
sorry,
none
it's
of
the
colors.
opposite. White is all the colors.
Anyway, moving on. Maybe it's time for the second quote. I'm thinking, McKay.
Yeah, you're right.
You want to take it
Okay.
over?
Sorry, that was a mistake on my part.
That
Let
was-
me- So I'm looking at July 1914 on
And
page
let's speak up for
79.
the camera.
79?
July 1914 on page 79.
Oh, this was what I was going to talk about.
So the quote is, "Fearful times are drawing near soon. Fresh graves will be everywhere. There will be famine, earthquakes, widespread death, and the eclipse of the sun and the moon." So I noticed like the imagery there, especially at the end with the eclipse of the sun and the moon. I think it's basically talking about how like the light in the world is going to be covered, and basically it's just going to be darkness, and like it's going to be a difficult time. And then
It's like the
also,
apocalypse. It's like apocalyptic.
Apocalypse Now.
and then I kind of talked about the tone a little, or not the, well, I guess I did talk about the tone a little bit with like the commas, like just like one bad thing after another. She's just naming off all these like disastrous things, and like how that kind of creates a melancholy tone or mood for this, for like the beginning, since this isn't the beginning of the poem. So probably something that's gonna linger throughout.
You know what I just realized?
Yeah, so, sorry.
Within this whole time, this is July 1914, right?
It's before World War, or the outbreak of World War I.
Okay, I was thinking as well, what's going on, like, during this time after we did the Russian Civil War, right?
So the Russian Civil War ended in 1917.
Yeah, but who's fighting the Russian Civil War?
Communists, the Russians.
It's the Reds versus the Whites.
I don't. Okay, potentially. I don't know that those have come out as factions yet. As
Well,
the
not yet,
monarch was still in control.
Well, this is July 1914, but
And later on, in her
Yes.
future chapters, yes, the whites could be referred to
Yes.
as the White Army, which she probably likes due to her she criticizes obviously.
She
the
wrote
Soviet
this,
Union.
she wrote this July 20th, 1914.
Yeah, so that poem,
So-
the white would not be significant in that manner, but later poems could.
yes, I'm saying.
Like the one that we read, that Olivia quoted.
Yeah, no, for that, for this specific poem and like that quote, I was like trying to figure out the purpose for it specifically being a one-legged stranger that's speaking this to her. It's not her just writing about her thoughts, it's being spoken to her. And so like the connection to that and her like her religious beliefs possibly, or like what the connotation was of that was in terms of the entire poem. Why couldn't it have just been her thinking that? Why does it have to be a type of like scenario that she's being told this?
Connor has entered the chat.
So I just interpreted it like it's maybe a soldier coming back and telling them
Yeah.
what's going on.
yes.
Like bad times are near. He's seeing some.
Yeah,
And there definitely was already political upheaval and chaos at the time, and just hadn't gotten to the point, of civil war like we see.
But they could tell it was gonna get there sooner
Yes,
or
there was
later.
already disagreement and conflict, and
Oh. And there's also what seems to be a biblical allusion on page 81.
There's a one on 81?
A biblical allusion. When it says, they are wounding your sacred body and they are casting lots for your robes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, very clear allusion, but I don't remember.
That's in quotes too.
Mhm.
So
So this is by the soldier.
Okay. what do you think the point of that is though?
what's the purpose or effect of that illusion, in your opinion?
Well, if it's an allusion to the cross, it would imply by default that something's coming better, like worse is yet to come, but something else will arrive later, Like maybe the end of the war. Or,
Yeah.
Do you think like the stanza before that, the one that the public affairs were not in vain, the earth was yearning for rain, with the exclamation mark and then warm red lips and spring trampled fields? Do you think that's like kind of like sarcastic or like ironic? Like because like
We asked for one.
Yeah, it's like this is what we wanted, and we end up getting like blood.
yeah.
Or is that what we actually want?
Yeah, or yeah.
Is that a commentary on human nature, not just society and conflict? Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, it could be making a commentary, yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I think it's pretty good. Oh no, we're only 12 minutes in.
What?
Connor, you have a quote for us?
I'm looking for poems. I'm looking at poems.
Anybody have
I have
a
a lot
quote?
of analysis.
We see the quote now. Let's just read something.
We can just go to the next poem.
Yeah, next poem. Let's read it.
Yeah, so the In Memoriam, that one, you guys wanna talk about
Yeah,
that
I'd love
poem?
to.
Or is there something else you wanted to talk about, Alex?
No, we can go to this one.
Which one?
No, we can go to this one.
That
Lots
one?
Wife.
Okay.
Which one?
Oh,
Lots
yes.
of life to read.
That was the one
Oh,
I
the next.
Let's read a poem.
I wrote down a bunch of quotes, I'm gonna try to find one.
What if we discuss Lot's wife? That one's pretty.
I like that one. That was my.
Let's do that one real quick. We'll come back to
What
the
page is that one?
109.
109. All right.
Let's go there.
Great. Can you give me a refresh about Lot? I remember who he is.
Lot was told by God to leave the city of Sodom and
Oh,
Gomorrah
Lot's wife.
before it got destroyed by
Oh.
like meteors and stuff.
Yeah, his wife.
And Gomorrah, or no, sorry, Lot's wife. Gomorrah's the other town. Lot's wife. God said, "Don't look at the city," and she looked back. And she turned. And she went, boom, salt pillar.
Yeah.
Bye bye. So it's kind of an idea of temptation and not being obedient. It's kind of the biblical purpose of that story. But then we have here the portrayal from Lot's wife's perspective. Let me find a nice little quote here. We have a rhetorical question, right? Who will weep for this woman? Isn't her death the least significant? But my heart will never forget the one who gave her life for a single glance.
Yes.
Wow.
I just a question that I like the Bible story. Is it the husband that makes her turn around?
No, she can't help it.
So why did he, oh, sorry, this is just in the first stanza,
Yes.
but in English spoke loudly to his wife that you can't know.
Which one, sorry?
So in the first one it says, but anguish spoke, oh, wait.
Anguish is like personified.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Yes. So she was essentially distraught
Oh,
by the
no,
fact her
yeah.
city and home was being destroyed and had to look back, right? So we have an idea of almost like an Adam and Eve scenario, somewhat, right? Being told not to sin, obviously taking consequences.
Dude, wait, was she a real Christian though?
Yeah.
I know.
Like Jewish at that time, I guess. Old Testament.
And I guess like all these poems are kind of like it's almost like she's empathizing with Lot's wife
Yes.
because what she's doing is like she's
similar
having
situation.
yeah she's like having to let go of her like the Russia she knew but like she can't.
Yeah,
help
and this
but,
time it's
right.
like completely different. Like,
Yeah, I think she's
already
relating that
communist,
biblical
yeah.
story to her own life where she wishes she could look back into Russia. And I don't know if this is what she's doing here. I mean, what year is this?
1920.
Oh, this is 20. That's
Yeah,
possible.
by this time there's like already
There's
a
propaganda,
lot,
secret
yeah.
police, you
And,
have
like,
the NKVD,
censorship, yeah.
so there's a lot of things where if you look back you'll be punished.
Yeah.
Not necessarily turned to a pillar of salt, but maybe put in the gulag, or censored, or whatever it might be, punished essentially for looking back on what Russia was. something that she thought was maybe better than what is currently, she's being distracted by it almost. So I think she's using that to kind of relate to her current situation, and therefore is empathizing with the biblical
But
character.
you think she's relating Russia like to God?
I think
I don't think
She,
that
I
she
mean,
would do
she's
that.
just paralleling her life to what happened with Lot's wife. She's paralleling.
Yeah.
The other thing is that this may be kind of a commentary on her belief that Russia has been destroyed
Yeah.
by
Yeah,
communism.
I think
That's
it's
almost like
more
God's
like-
wrath on
That's
Russia.
what I would.
Is that what you're saying?
No, I
No.
wouldn't say that.
Okay.
I thought it was more of like she's relating like Russia and how it is destroyed to like the city that was already destroyed. And, like she's looking back at like the city that she once loved and it's like, is it like so horrible for me to look back and like remember like what it used to be? And that's why she's kind of taking the side of Lot's wife, where it's like in the biblical story it's more presented that like it was like Lot's wife didn't obey or was like reminiscing on the past, whereas she wasn't looking at the future, and that scene is like a negative thing. Whereas here she kind of flips like the script and starts talking about how like, it's really not like so bad. Like who's gonna weep for the like what it once was if it wasn't for her, you know?
Mhm.
Like it shouldn't all just be forgotten.
Yeah. I like that. Let me think of a question here. What do you think? What do you think the purpose and effect, or maybe reason that she added the quote, the biblical quote? Because I would assume she's made other biblical allusions without highlighting them directly, right? So why did she choose to make it clear? I mean, the title of the poem is Lot's Wife. Why did she quote Genesis then, if it's already clear in the story? And this is, especially back then in Orthodox Russia, going to be a pretty well-known story, right? What do you think? Maybe the reason or what's behind that choice?
It's not
I
just
see
right
it.
for Russia.
Okay, so yeah, is that the purpose? Is it for more general audience, or?
I'm just saying,
Yeah.
like, I think that the context helps, like,
Okay.
Well, and if you
I
like,
think
Also-
Yeah, what do you think?
I mean, for me, I feel like because obviously she's talking about looking back at like the Russia she once loved, and that was like way better for her life and stuff. I feel like that's even kind of sort of making a commentary, like I'm going to stick with what I believe in, regardless of how Russia has changed. And like in the context of this poem, looking back on like the town city that had been destroyed, I feel like it's her just kind of showing even to the Russian people, like regardless of it being just for Russia or not, that she's going to stay true to her beliefs and stay true to herself. And she's making that known in the context of the poem.
I think that's also similar to like what we said in that other poem where she was holding the candle up because she's a poet and she notices that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of similar to this one because she kind of is also bearing that weight of being the one who's actually like looking at reality when other people are turning a blind eye. And so she's the one that kind of has to bear that weight. Like as a poet, she's the one that notices Tom's thoughts.
I mean, to answer Grant's question, why the quote, I think because it's like the whole story, like that quote could be summed up like in that small quote, but then she gives it a lot more attention. Because like in the Bible, it's kind of talked about in a matter-of-fact way, and like it doesn't really talk about the consequences or what. I think in here it's giving more significance to the instance, and like in the Bible, it doesn't talk about like empathizing with the woman. It kind of just blatantly states it. So I think that's why it's kind of comparing the two.
Yeah, I think we can kind of, from what you just said there, kind of draw some contextuality between Shimborska and Akhmatova. I don't know if you guys remember the 9/11 poem, where that took a picture and expounded it, kind of took a moment. That's kind of what she did here, somewhat, to some extent, I think, is kind of took a moment. The moment that she turned back and turned and saw it, and then expands upon the emotion, the reason, the perspectives, things like that, within that moment, if you will.
I think also like when Christian was talking about how like he connected this one to like the candlestick and like how she like bears the light for everybody. I think, and also to go like to Grant's questions like why she like wrote from the book of Genesis even though everybody knows the quote. It probably helps because like at Russia at this point like they were trying to eliminate religion because like for communism like religion is like something that somebody would worship instead of like the government. So that was like a negative thing. So by like labeling it like the book of Genesis, I think that's like for future generations, like who may, at that point, like for her, she was probably really unsure of how like religion would continue in Russia. So like by labeling it, it kind of shows that, people who may not know in the future that it is from like the Bible.
Yeah. What's the, I'm gonna change the direction of this. What's the purpose of naming the title Lot's wife and not giving the wife a name? Because I'm pretty sure in the Bible we get her name, right?
To the best of my knowledge, she is Lot's wife.
Oh.
Yep.
Yeah, I would feel like, I don't know, but it says like right here, Lot's wife looked back and or soul. So like that would make me think that it does not give her a name.
I think that also goes in with the quote though. It's like the fact that she's kind of skimmed over. Like she's not, there's not much attention given to her. Like it's
No,
matter of factly
yeah.
stated, and it doesn't really talk about, you know, any emotions or anything associated to it.
Yeah, no, I just looked it up and she's not named in the Bible. She's just Lot's wife.
And it seems like that's kind of the entire point she's making in the last paragraph, is that she is insignificant to
Yeah.
most people, and that's kind of the tragedy itself.
Okay, so, changing the direction again. What's the purpose of, what's this lady? Akhmatova, she relates herself to this lady, but this lady dies at the end in a very tragic way, I guess you could say. So what's the purpose of that? Or is that foreshadowing?
I think it's showing that her heart died whenever Russia turned like communist and all, like religion was banned and like, you know, just kind of like not necessarily a physical death, but an emotional, metaphorical death for her life and like her childhood growing up and just kind of like all of her beliefs.
Yeah, and her poetry was getting rejected at this point in time too. Like just like this Lot's wife was almost like, I mean she died like it's kind of a form of rejection, I guess. But like, I mean she can relate the same way that all her poetry, like she's the one that's reflecting on what's already happened to Russia and like in their civil war when they entered World War I. And then all of that is now kind of being shunned just because it's like reflecting on the past.
Yeah.
Like definitely being turned into souls, God's
I think also it seems to me kind of like a cry for help almost, because she's like, she kind of parallels herself to Lot's wife, and so she talks about how it's like a deadly pain, and she no longer sees anything, so I think she's kind of like at the end of her whip, where she, it's like hard to carry on, basically.
And the
In the
rhetorical,
position
yeah.
that she's in. Even though she has this responsibility, it's becoming more and more difficult.
Yeah, I think like the rhetorical questions, or maybe not rhetorical, but just like the questions in the last paragraph help to like illustrate like that idea that she's like really, it is like a cry for help.
Yeah, I think that's also pretty significant because she says, like, who's gonna care, and then she said, like, I will care, and so I think that's kind of like significant, but because it reveals that she's basically like her own motivation in this. It's like while she feels, while she's desperate, like she's also the one that's, you know, it's basically like pure will that she's carrying on.
Hey, sorry to go back, but going back to page 79, like I haven't looked at this whole time, but there's notes at the back of the book that describe like illusions and stuff that might have been glanced over. So her white mantle, when it talks about that on 79.
I wrote that down in my notes, but I didn't know.
The mother of God will spread her white mantle over this enormous grief. So it talks about how her white mantle is a reference to the legend that the mother of God appeared in a church in Constantinople in the 10th century. And I mean, y'all can read the rest of it. It's just on page